Hello again, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for this Saturday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service. Up first, satellite imagery showing moisture or westerly flow here with the clouds traveling from west to east and some pretty good winds coming across the Bering Sea, both at the surface and aloft. Low pressure here tracking eastward toward the southeast coast, spreading snow. Snow advisories today, they'll be ending shortly by 6 p.m. They should be over. But snow advisories for 4 to 6 inches of snow that fell across portions of the southeast coast. They're kind of variable. And lighter amounts down to the south there. It looks like some breaks in the overcast showing up this afternoon down over the Dixon entrance area, as well as up and just off the coast there as the main front continues to push eastward, kind of oriented east-west up through the interior here and actually beginning to sag southward a little bit. The frontal boundary through there are the more solid cloud areas and some snow as a big upper level low, cold upper vortex drops southward, and that's going to keep the blizzard warnings that went on today for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast going tonight and through tomorrow with winds gusting to 50 miles an hour, and that'll create heavy drifting snow. Visibilities will be a whiteout at times or less than a quarter mile. Again, through tomorrow now winter weather advisories back to the central coast there at around Barrow for gusty west winds. Conditions not as bad as farther to the east, but still look for visibilities under a half mile at times, maybe some gusts 25 to 40 miles an hour out of the west tonight, and then better conditions back to the west. There's no advisories on the western coast, and no advisories or watches anywhere else in the state as well for the next at least 24 hours. You can see some breaks here, higher pressure, weak high pressure trying to build in over the Bristol Bay area and the southwest over Bristol Bay, shifting eastward here into the southwest interior. Otherwise, lots of clouds up to the north across the northern Bering Sea. Next system bringing wind and rain and snow. Starting out snow, starting to switch over to rain with milder southeast winds there, pretty gusty as high as anywhere 40, 60 miles an hour there. Widespread gale force winds, or at least ahead of the front there is, and then back with the main low center back to the west. Otherwise, some breaks here over the Fox Islands. Mostly cloudy day for the Perbilofs, and starting to break out after the snow shifting up into the northeast here, or to the northeast from Cook Inlet, breaking out over the central and southern inlet, spreading northward in the late afternoon. And rolling that again, you can see the flow mainly from west to east here, but again, starting to see a little bit of a push to the south there, kind of making for a stationary boundary there through the central interior, and that system out to the west, roughly a center up here, and then an upper one down to the southwest. That's about 996 millibars. Front pushing eastward here, again spreading snow into the southwest coast, and the front pushing past the Pribilof Islands there with showers out to the west. Otherwise, over the panhandle today, we had rain and snow there over the southern southeast coast. And the forecast for tonight is for that low pressure area to continue. They're moving southeastward, and so snow showers and lower snowfall levels here across the southern southeast coast. Look for mostly precipitation in the form of snow all the way down to sea level there for the southern areas, and then scattering out the snow showers. A little bit of an increase in the northerly winds through Lynn Canal, but nothing too terribly bad. Outflow wind gusts on the increase, but again, not really all that strong here, but definitely windier for the North Gulf Coast in those channeled areas, Prince William Sound, places like Resurrection Bay and Seward, and a lot windier here. Again, gale force winds in the forecast for the Barren Islands and Kachemak Bay into southern Cook Inlet there. Higher pressure building in over the western interior, and that lower pressure over the Gulf of Alaska. So some pretty good northwest winds developing here, but it'll be more of a gap outflow wind for the North Gulf Coast and the Copper River Delta. Otherwise, persisting light snow showers here along the Alaska range from 40 Mile Country all the way down, and on the east side here, or the west side of the western Alaska range as it remains clears out over south central Alaska. Some drying up here over the northern interior areas, and that next trough bringing some increase in the winds again. Blizzard warnings continue through tomorrow here for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast with winds gusting to 50 miles an hour and additional snows creating whiteout conditions there. Look for snow all the way down to the Brooks Range, and then it should cut off right around the crest of the mountains. Winds will be much lighter, of course, south of the Brooks Range here and under the high center itself. That low pressure center now shifting up into the far western Bering Sea, and that pushing rain and fog, and a little bit milder temperatures. Could change over to rain completely there for the Pribilofs later on tonight, but rain spreading up to the Alaska Peninsula, probably starting out in the form of snow, then switching over later on. Again, pretty windy west-northwest winds, gusty there for Kodiak Island, but still a chance of snow showers, mainly over Shelikof Strait and the western side of the island there, as well as over the Kilberg Mountains. A few light snow showers continue to linger through tonight. And then for tomorrow, high pressure shifts into the southern interior, so sunny skies here, south central Alaska, Copper River Basin, up into the central interior and back out toward Kotzebue Sound, the Seward Peninsula. Another trough swinging down around that low center. It's just off the map up there. Again, blizzard warnings continue tomorrow there for the eastern Beaufort Seacoast, winter weather advisory for the central coast. Same conditions there and winds. And look for some increase in the winds here along the southwest coast as that front pushes in. Then some even stronger winds here, very tight gradient here south of that low center. So pretty gusty winds out of the west, could be possibly storm force out of the west, definitely gales there with that trough swinging through, but just grazing the central Aleutian areas. Most of the action will stay to the north of the Aleutian chain. And slow moving trough here gradually decreases the snow showers as it weakens and continues to drift off to the southeast. But that chance will linger at least through the afternoon there over the southern areas as sunshine increases to the north and less gradient now along the coast, so a lot less wind, and really kind of a light wind situation shaping up for tomorrow afternoon. And the outlook for Monday, low pressure moves up into the panhandle again with snow in the north, rain and snow down to the south there, and another trough coming in brings a chance of snow showers across. Actually, the one that moves northeastward here brings snow tomorrow night, and then Monday changing over to snow showers. Pretty good trough swinging through, so numerous snow showers south central Alaska on up into the Tanana Valley. Now the action on the western Beaufort Sea coast up here over the northwest with possibly gale force winds and snow and blowing snow, and definitely a deterioration of conditions there, but improving on the east side. Low temperatures tonight forecast well below zero, 15 to 20 below over the northeast interior, to lower to mid-30s there over the Aleutians and Alaska Peninsula, teens and 20s for the Panhandle. Highs for tomorrow afternoon. Either side of zero up here over the north central and northeast interior, staying below zero there for the Koyukuk Valley. Mid to upper 30s for the Panhandle, lower 40s for the Alaska Peninsula. And then your lows even colder the following morning, Monday morning here, from 25 to maybe 30, 35 below zero. More around 30 below zero, 35 below might be pushing it. Otherwise, teens for the Panhandle. Teens 5 to 15 south central Alaska, 20s here in the southwest. Highs for the afternoon staying below zero up here to the north, a little above on the Arctic coast. Mild lower 40s on Alaska, Cold Bay, and 30s for the Panhandle.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving on into flying weather. Lots of IFR up here in the Arctic coast. All the way across the Arctic coast and the North Slope down to the Brooks Range, and then becoming better south of the mountains there in across toward Norton Sound. And then we got marginal VFR, a little bit of IFR there. It looks like around the mountains there north of Fairbanks, and then marginal stuff out to the border. VFR breaking out south and east of the Alaska Range, and also down into Bristol Bay here, North Gulf Coast, Kodiak eastward into the northern Panhandle. Next system pushing a band of IFR east and northeast toward the Pribilofs, not quite making it until it goes on by tomorrow. Makes a really good with that strong southwest jet right up to the southwest coast. Just a narrow band though, but right along the coastline tomorrow afternoon, south of St. Lawrence Island, and then down across the Alaska Peninsula, followed by marginal VFR becoming VFR here, Adak and Atka areas. And for the Panhandle, good VFR there, some lingering marginal stuff down south, otherwise VFR over southern Alaska. And for the forecast for Monday, IFR, Central Arctic coast back down into about Kivalina there, and maybe over the Selawik Valley, Kobuk Valley, give or take there, some IFR possible. Marginal to the west, marginal to the east. Big area IFR now for Monday morning here across southern Alaska over, and then drop southward there. Just west of Yakutat, marginal VFR covering the Panhandle. And for Monday afternoon, IFR here now from the Seward Peninsula into the central Brooks Range, marginal for the Arctic coast, North Slope, big area marginal VFR through the central interior, back down across the Kuskokwim Delta, all of the southwest coast, Alaska Peninsula, and the Aleutians with some areas of IFR out west there. IFR here over toward the eastern border, a little more extensive down toward Annette, Metlakatla, Stewart, and Hyder. In those areas, spotty IFR possible for the North Gulf Coast, otherwise marginal. And for passes tomorrow, lowest conditions, northern approaches of both Anaktuvik and Adigan will likely be IFR, marginal VFR through the pass, Lake Clark and Merrill VFR, and rainy, starting out marginal possibly, and then becoming VFR during the morning and through the afternoon, VFR flying. Windy, same forecast, starting out marginal, becoming VFR, and trending upward as well for Isabel throughout the day, especially in the morning hours. And then for Mentasta, possibly becoming marginal or for VFR in the afternoon. Kind of a little more pessimistic forecast for this pass. Could stay marginal throughout much of the day. And for Tanita, though, good VFR, same forecast for Portage, VFR in the southeast coast, or Chilkoot and White Pass, good VFR. And then for the freezing levels at the surface here, Kodiak Island, Alaska Peninsula, up and then down across the Panhandle. And then we have a good surge of warmer air coming northward here. By comparison today, got 6,000 to 8,000 feet here coming up across the Fox Islands and Alaska Peninsula, 2,000 feet just about up to the Pribilofs, and at the surface there just south of St. Matthew Island. Icing-wise, good moisture coming in with that next system pushing into the southwest coast and Bristol Bay. Could see some widespread moderate rime icing above about 6,000 feet here. Really along the southwest coast, Nunivak Island, down to the Aleutian Range, Alaska Peninsula, starting to increase there, Kodiak Island. Areas of mixed icing up there along the Arctic coast. Could be some isolated areas of moderate as well, or considerable moderate rime or mixed icing along the Arctic coast. And then this area just extending down to Adak and Atka. Jet stream, polar vortex here dropping southward there, keeping the blizzard warnings going along the eastern Arctic coast tomorrow. Wind weather advisories back to the west there towards the central coast. Ridging popping up here over the Alaska in advance of this system out to the west, and behind that low pulling into western Canada there. So northwest jet, 120 knots here, drying it out over southern Alaska, but 130 knot southwest jet driving that front right into the southwest coast tomorrow afternoon, and the next one out there near the Chukchi, or the Sea of Okhotsk. And for the 9,000 foot wind flow chart, good west-northwesterlies, 25 to as high as 40 knots up there over the northeast interior to the Arctic coast. Westerlies 20 to 40 knots through the central interior and about 30 knots over southern Alaska. Big increase in the winds with this next Bering Sea storm. Southwest 60 knots bearing down on Bristol Bay, 70 knots for the Alaska Peninsula, otherwise 55 to 60 for the Aleutians. Southeast coast 15 to 20 west-northwesterlies. And for the turbulence chart tomorrow, look for occasional moderate chop across the Brooks Range, southwest coast, and the Aleutians.
Floating hundreds of miles from Earth, astronauts get a unique perspective of our planet. While they might recognize landmarks, space is the only place they can see the very edge of our planet's atmosphere.
From orbit, particularly looking at the horizon, did bring to mind how thin the atmosphere is. It's like an onion skin around this great big ball of the Earth.
This uppermost layer of Earth's atmosphere, the ionosphere, also overlaps with the very beginning of space. It's the job of NASA's new mission, GOLD, the Global Scale Observations of the Limmendisk Instrument, to study this region, a region that isn't just for astronauts to explore, but that affects humans every day down on the ground. For one thing, this layer of the upper atmosphere helps protect us from harmful radiation and energy emanating from the sun. But in our modern society, it does so much more. It affects the smartphone that sits in your pocket and the radio waves that guide our airplanes. The ionosphere is a crucial layer of the atmosphere through which our communications and GPS signals travel. And when this region changes, it impacts those communication signals. Changes can occur above this region from the sun's activity, also known as space weather. Changes can also occur below from Earth's weather, such as hurricanes and wind patterns. GOLD connects the dots between how space weather and Earth's weather shape the upper reaches of the atmosphere. But this region isn't easy to study. The ionosphere spans roughly 60 to 400 miles from Earth's surface, which is too high for aircraft and scientific balloons, and the lower regions are too low to easily study with satellites. What are attainable, however, are the swaths of red and green light shining out from the upper atmosphere. Formed when the sun's rays hit atmospheric molecules, this light, named airglow, comes from green and red bands of glowing gas. Some of the airglow is invisible to our eyes, shining in infrared and ultraviolet light, which can only be seen with scientific instrumentation. Taking advantage of our planet's natural glow is gold. The gold instrument, which is about the size of a mini-fridge, is hitching a ride on a commercial communication satellite, SES-14. The satellite's orbit lies 22,000 miles above Earth, where it can record images in ultraviolet light to monitor changes in airglow across the globe. These images give information on the temperature, density, and composition of particles in the upper atmosphere. Gold collects these observations faster than any mission has ever done before. It captures an image of Earth's entire disk every 30 minutes, allowing scientists to see how the upper atmosphere evolves throughout the day. Gold joins a host of missions studying the very nature of space, around Earth, the Sun, and planets. As NASA ventures farther and farther from home, knowing the nature of space itself is crucial for our journey to understand our solar system and beyond.
There's a new class of chemical compounds impacting the Earth's ozone layer and raising concerns among some scientists. But a new NASA analysis indicates stratospheric ozone could actually be impacted more by climate change and the continued release of already banned chemicals. The Earth's ozone hole is showing signs of recovery, decades after the landmark agreement called the Montreal Protocol that banned many chemical compounds harmful to the ozone layer.
So we know the Montreal Protocol was a huge success. This was signed in the late 1980s when scientists and policymakers from around the world gathered together to try to save the ozone layer.
The chemicals they regulated persist in the atmosphere for many decades. They thin the ozone layer and they create a seasonal hole over Antarctica. They basically take away part of our planet's natural sunscreen, and that increases the risk of skin cancer and damage to plants.
Scientists have projected the ozone hole could disappear almost completely by about 2075, but several factors could delay that recovery.
There are some industrial compounds that are not banned by the Montreal Protocol, but as they enter the atmosphere, they will also hurt the ozone layer.
But the unregulated compounds have a short lifespan in the atmosphere, unlike the chlorofluorocarbons that were originally regulated. So they have a short-lived impact on ozone, and we don't think they'll delay recovery by more than a few years.
We project that by 2050, more than half of the ozone-depleting compounds in the atmosphere will come from long-lived substances banned by the protocol.
Because these compounds stay in the air for such a long time, compared to the unregulated, short-lived compounds, they will have a disproportionate and lingering impact on ozone. So any non-compliance with the protocol can have significant consequences.
And the really big uncertainty in ozone layer recovery is climate change. There are many naturally produced ozone-depleting substances that are emitted by the oceans. And as the oceans continue to warm due to climate change, those emissions will increase, and that will further delay ozone recovery.
Scientists want to better understand how climate change will affect ozone recovery.
This is a hard problem. As a scientific community, we need to work on this major issue. We now have a powerful new tool to simulate atmosphere and its interaction with land and ocean to study this issue. And that's what we're going to do.
How can you see the atmosphere? The answer is blowing in the wind. Tiny particles known as aerosols are carried by the air around the globe. This visualization uses data from NASA satellites combined with our knowledge of physics and meteorology to track 3 aerosols: dust, smoke, and sea salt. Sea salt, shown here in blue, is picked up by winds passing over the ocean. As tropical storms and hurricanes form, The salt particles are concentrated into the spiraling shape we all recognize. With their movements, we can follow the formation of Hurricane Irma and see the dust from the Sahara, shown in tan, get washed out of the storm center by the rain. Advances in computing speed allow scientists to include more details of these physical processes in their simulations of how the aerosols interact with the storm systems. The increased resolution of the computer simulation is apparent in fine details like the hurricane bands spiraling counterclockwise. Computer simulations let us see how different processes fit together and evolve as a system. By using mathematical models to represent nature, we can separate the system into component parts and better understand the underlying physics of each. Today's research improves next year's weather forecasting ability. Hurricane Ophelia was very unusual. It headed northeast, pulling in Saharan dust and smoke from wildfires in Portugal, carrying both to Ireland and the UK. This aerosol interaction was very different from other storms of the season. As computing speed continues to increase, scientists will be able to bring more scientific details into the simulations, giving us a deeper understanding of our home planet.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Today's sea ice analysis change. Colder air now coming down through the Bering Strait into the northern Bering. So the retreat and the melt-off is really halting up in that area and may kind of change course and see some expansion. Moving on to coastal water forecasts. Sunday, southeast coast here, 25 to as high as 35 knots on the south coast, with seas up to 25 feet. Lighter northeast 20 there toward Yakutat. Lynn Canal, northern Lynn Canal, those gale force northerlies picking up late tonight through tomorrow at 35 knots. Otherwise, north-northwest at around 20, Stevens Passage and Clarence Strait. Outlook for Monday, south 30 knots, gust 45 knots now, so a complete reversal in direction there for Lynn Canal. Southerlies pretty brisk at about 30 knots here for the central and southern inside waters. Westerly gales here along the south coast, and those increases you head north, almost storm warnings, seeing gusts 60 knots with sustained winds 45 knots for the north coast here, seas approaching 20 feet. And for Prince William Sound, northwest 25 tomorrow. That extends on down into the Gulf of Alaska and then increases to 30 knots on the west side. 40 knot northwesterlies for the Barren Islands, and west 35 there for Kachemak Bay. Northwest 20 for southern Cook Inlet. And for the northern Cook Inlet on Monday, quite a contrast here. Just north at 10 knots, but southwest 30 knots. South of the Forelands, 11-foot seas. Westerlies, 45 knots, Kachemak Bay right across the Barrens. Fall back to about 40 knots for the North Gulf Coast. Seas running 15 to 20 feet. Light north winds with 2-foot seas for Prince William Sound. Kodiak Island, west winds 30 knots tomorrow, and southwest 30 from Sitkinak to Cape Sarachef. Then we got gale force southwesterlies there on the Bering Sea side of the peninsula. Small craft advisories for Bristol Bay. And then on Monday, big increase there in Bristol Bay. West winds almost storm force, but we'll go with 45 knots and 22-foot seas. West 45 there, Shelikof Strait, 50-knot winds. Storm warnings east side of Kodiak Island, all the way down to Cape Sarachef, and even on the north side, Alaska Peninsula, storm force day coming up on Monday with seas 33 feet, building to 33 feet, and 45 for Bristol Bay. And then for the Aleutians, Fox Islands, 40 to 45 southwesterlies kick into the storms here toward Adak and Atga with gusts to 65 knots out of the southwest, 28-foot seas. Strongest winds here on the north side of the islands here, 70-knot gusts out west of Adak, and then dropping back down to west 50 for Shemya. And then lighter winds in store for Monday, coming down to 30 knots here for the central Aleutians, west-southwest, turning mostly west out to the Shemya area. And then west winds 40 knots for Unalaska Island, with seas as high as 33 feet there on the Bering Sea side of the islands. And for the southwest coast, we've got southeast winds tomorrow at 30 knots with 9-foot seas. Easterlies up here, and that'll be colder air too, so that's going to tend to cause the ice to expand back out to the west instead of the big retreat we've seen lately. Easterlies 35 knots there for St. Matthew Island, but southwest winds for the Pribilofs at 45 knots, seas building to 20 feet. And those turn westerly on Monday, but seas still up there around 28 feet. And we've got full gales here south of Nunivak Island blowing into Kuskokwim Bay, 22-foot seas there. Small craft advisories from St. Matthew Island northward to St. Lawrence Island in the Bering Strait. And then for the tomorrow's forecast from Wales all the way up the west side of the coast here, west at 20, increasing northwest 25, brisk wind advisories, central coast, and those increase again to gale force there, 40 knots out of the west for the east side. And then for the Monday outlook, really dropping off here down to 15 knots over there toward Demarcation Point, and southwest 20, brisk wind advisory again for the central coast, and now extends all the way down to Wales there in the Bering Strait. We're west 30 knots though, say from Cape Beaufort down across Kotzebue Sound again to Wales. And then for tonight, big storm center out west, way out over the western Bering Sea, but tight gradient here keeps those strong winds along and north of the Aleutian chain. Wind and rain, or snow, changing toward rain here, coming into the Aleutian, spreading to the Alaska Peninsula. Higher pressure break here along the west coast, and lingering snow showers along the Alaska Range, but really clearing out and increasing the winds there, as I mentioned, for the Barren Islands, Kachemak Bay area, may channel northerlies for the North Gulf Coast. And snow showers continue, especially over the central and southern southeast coast, maybe more of a continuous snow. And for Sunday, next storm pushing wind and rain into the southwest coast, and that continues on Monday to move eastward.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.